afternoon, everybody. I am Eric Guthrie. I'm the author of the book Blockchain or Die. I'm a partner in a law firm called the Cogent Law Group here in DC. And I'm also the director of training for the Government Blockchain Association. Now, on the program, it's supposed to be a panel, but guess what? Now it's a keynote, so I thank you for your attention and the time that I have. And I get to talk to you about the exciting thing called intellectual property. Isn't that wonderful? So, all right, I like that. So, this is not going to be a keynote. It's more going to be like a crash course, because I want to show you guys how you guys can use intellectual property for your products and your services and for your logos and whatever you're doing. So let me ask this question. I'm going to start with this question. How many of you have an NFT? Raise your hand. Okay, you got a few of them, okay? How many of you have protected your NFT with intellectual property? Raise your hand. Okay, we got one. Good. So about 5 went up, 1 stayed up, right? And that's actually a pretty good average, because usually no hands go up, right? Now, I'm going to tell you a couple of stories from my experience as an attorney for some clients and how it's impacted them and how you can learn from those experiences. I had one client come to me, and they had a bunch of NFTs and things they want to do on the blockchain. And I said, okay, that's great. But there's a phrase I always use, and I'm going to say it a number of times when I'm up here. Your digital property is protected on the blockchain, but it's not protected off the blockchain. What does that mean? That means that if you put something on there, whether it's an NFT or any other kind of digital property, you got the transparency, you have the authentication, you have everything on the blockchain, but off the blockchain, you got nothing, right? So that means that someone can take it and use it, and then you got to fight for your rights that you put on the blockchain. You got to fight for it off-chain. So I had this one client that approached me to say, hey, listen, I'm doing NFTs. I said, great, let's do an IP. Oh, but it's on the blockchain. We don't need that. Yeah, you do. But they didn't want to listen, and then what happened, long story short, is they found out that other people actually set up other programs in that same name. And they came to me and said, well, what can I do now? I said, you can't do much. I mean, we can try and litigate, but that's going to be an expensive proposition. You don't have the rights to fall back on that you would have had if you'd done IP. Second client story. Very similar process. They're a DAO, and this is actually just a few months ago. And they listened to me, and they put together a nice DAO package with NFTs, and we did a whole IP. We did a trademark application, and we're getting ready to do a copyright application. We did a trademark for the name with the logo and everything like that. Turns out someone was actually going to start using the same name, but now they have IP protections, and we sent the email saying this has now been trademarked, and now they have protections. Now, the story isn't over yet because we haven't got a response yet, but we had that to rely on. And that's the important part, right? You need to rely on your IP to protect your intellectual property. Now, I'm going to break down intellectual property in 2 areas, copyright and trademark, okay? Let's start with copyright. I'm going to tell you my first foray into NFTs. I heard about it back in 2017 or something like that. So I go on to OpenSea, and I'm scrolling through OpenSea, and I see one of my favorite albums on OpenSea, which is Notorious B.I.G.'s Greatest Hits. You know, the one with he's got the Kango on, and it's like the album cover from his nose up. And I see it pixelated. And I think, holy crap, this has to be copyright infringement. I mean, you can clearly tell it was Notorious B.I.G. You can clearly tell it was from the album, but they just pixelated it. And for those of you who don't know what that means, it means that it made it little boxes, looks like little boxes, right? Rather than the actual picture of Notorious B.I.G. Since this was so new to me, I said, you know what? I'm going to reserve my judgment to see if this really is copyright infringement. But it turns out my legal gut was right, okay? So now, what would somebody do with that, okay? If you bought it, did you buy an infringed piece of art? If you made it, are you infringing upon Notorious B.I.G.'s piece of art, right? And let me tell you something. This is actually happening big in our community because we've actually had other lawsuits where a bunch of artists have been sued because The other artists have used their image in an NFT, right? This is happening really big in our community. So if you're doing an NFT and you're doing copyright, and let's say your NFT has 5,000 variations, how many copyrights do you think you have to file? Anybody? 5,000 copyrights? What do you think? Yes? You could. It's not wrong. Or you could file one, a derivative art and compilation copyright. Now, let me give you a big secret from a legal perspective. Copyright ain't that hard. You could do it on your own, at home, on your laptop, no problem whatsoever. You just got to know when to do it, and two, you got to have your copyright material that you're ready to upload, and three, just answer all the questions, and just wait for it to come back, right? So it's not that difficult to protect your intellectual property offline using copyright. I highly advise you do it. I have not charged a client 1 penny for copyright protection. Why? It's too easy. I can show them how to do it themselves. Okay? So that's copyright. Now let's talk trademark. Now trademark's a little different. Now I'll tell you something about trademark. A lot of people think that, gee, I'm doing an NFT, it's got a picture on it, so it has to be trademarked. Not really. The only time you would trademark your NFT or other type of digital property if that's going to be the logo for your company, right? That's when you would do it. And also the trade name and trademark. Trade name, you don't even need to have a logo or any type of artwork. You just put the name in there, okay? Now, that's more complicated. You could do it yourself, but the TEAS form, the trademark electronic application system, that's the one that takes a little more nuances. And I can tell you right now, there are some nuances in there that really only experts would know. That's where I get most of my work. As a matter of fact, I'm really glad that this is actually becoming a big thing because I've had more clients come to me about trademark in the past year than I had in the past 4 or 5 years. The message is getting out there. It's not that expensive to protect your intellectual property that you're going to rely on to make either a name for yourself, build your brand, or make income using intellectual property, right? So that is something you should all, both of you to raise your hand for except for you, brother, that raise your hand and you're good to go. The other ones, if you have an NFT, do your IP. If you're thinking about it, do your IP. And at the end, I'm going to give you a couple of free tidbits of information that will help you greatly in this area. So that's trademark, okay? Now, I'll say one more thing about trademark, and that is when you're doing your trademark, do your trademark search first. Because if you have this great idea, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to do this great name, and you go on there, and it's like, oh, it's already taken. But you already put a lot of time, effort, and money into making that name. You've not got to pivot. Okay? Now, there are a couple of exceptions, and the one that I always give is the name Delta. There's Delta Airlines, there's Delta Faucet, there's Delta Construction. Well, how can there be 3 Deltas, Eric? Because there are different industries where they all apply, right? So when you do your trademark, you're going to pick the actual industry / sub area, and then that's where your trademark's going to be, okay? So that's where you may need an attorney. And I'll be here the rest of the day if you want to talk to me about it. I'm happy to chat about it with anybody. So I'm going to give you my final pieces of advice before I come off the stage, and here they are. Number 1, and this is something that I advise every client to do, and you'd be surprised how many of them just say, oh my God, I never thought about that. When I wrote Blockchain or Die, because it happened to me. When I wrote Blockchain or Die, I went and I was searching a name online a few times, and then what happened? I went to get the URL for blockchaindie.com, gone. Someone took it. Right? Isn't that terrible? So then I said, you know what? Pivot, blockchaindie.org. And that's why my website is blockchaindie.org. About 3 or 4 days to the year of the anniversary of me getting the website, I got an email saying, hey, we see that you are the owner of blockchaindie.org. Wouldn't you love to buy blockchaindie.com? And I was like, these are the ones that took my name. So I said, no thanks. 2 days later, and they said they wanted $5,000 for it. So then, about 2 days later, they said, hey, we'll sell it to you for $500 instead. I didn't even respond. I just had my timer on. The day after that 1-year anniversary was up, guess what was available? Blockchain.com. Guess who bought it? This guy right here for $20, right? Don't get took. People are out there trying to take you. Now, I made the mistake. If you're doing a name search, do not do too much searching online because there are bots out there that are recording what you look for, and they will try and buy it first. So the first piece of advice I give my clients is limit your internet searches and buy your URL quick. If you know you want it, don't stall, get it. Now, that does not give you IP protection, but what happens is the more you own in the public space, the stronger your IP protection is from a legal and a non-legal standpoint. Second piece of advice, as well as the URL, go on all the social media platforms, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, Instagram, or Reddit, GitHub, whichever one it is. Get your name in every one of those spaces. Why is that? Because if they get it first, now you got a problem on your hands. You got to figure out how to brand differently, or maybe even change your name entirely, right? But you don't want to do that. You can do all of this stuff before you even apply for your intellectual property in the first place. So those are my 3 bits of information. I will pause to see if there's any questions before I come off the stage. So there's a mic right there. If you got a question, just go to the mic, and I'll be happy to try and answer it for you. So any questions at all? There we go.
Excuse me, I got a question real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
How long does it take to trademark? How long does it take to get that information back?
Excellent question. So I had probably about a 2-year hiatus, which is during the pandemic, that I didn't do any trademarks. Before that, it was about 6 to 9 months, depending on how you did a trademark. And this kind of dives into a little bit of a detailed answer because there's different ways you can trademark. I'd say the average is 6 months. My last client, I mean, when you get good, though, you get good. My last client, I got it for them in 3 months. They were shocked it came by so quickly. And another thing I'll mention, at the end of that form, there was, do you want to do international protections? Which is basically WIPO, World International Property Organization, Protection Organization. That is an option for you as well. If you want to do a global brand, protect globally. But yeah, 6 months is average, but it could be longer depending on complexities. Yes, question.
Hey, everybody. My name is Alexander Walker, part of Web3Domains.com, reporter for them, actually. But I had a question for you because I'm starting to realize that there's a correlation between physical property, digital property, and now intellectual property.
Yep.
I was wondering, you had mentioned very briefly about names, and one of the areas that I deal with digital assets is domain names. Can you go through the process for everybody of how to trademark a domain name? Thank you.
You want to go through the entire process? All right. I'll give you the cliff notes, right? First, you do your search. Make sure it's available, right? Make sure it's available, and because you'd be surprised, there are names out there that can say live, dead, 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 dead. So you're gonna make sure that you're picking a trademark that doesn't have a live name associated with it. That's number one. Number two, I'll give you 3 pieces of advice in terms of preparation for your trademark. One, know the time and day, well, not so much time, know the day you first use the mark in actual commerce. Right? That could be the first time you made your website, the first time you put it on social media, the first time you use it on your letterhead, right? Because they're going to ask you in the application, they do ask you, when was the first time you used it? That's number one. That's number 2. Number 3, make sure that your logo fits the trademark application's specificity for the actual artwork. So it's got to be, I believe it's a JPEG, but so don't put a PNG, don't put a GIF, because it's going to reject it, right? It's got to be a certain size requirement. So whenever I do an application for my clients, I send them the specificity first for the JPEG, so then I got to go hunting for it, right? And they talk to the developer, and the developer puts it in that format first, so when I talk to them, it's already done, and the application is that much faster. Okay, Ryan?
I was going to have a question about music NFTs, but more seriously, how does sampling music without clearing that sample go in the music NFT scene?
Excellent question. I don't know, because you know what? It hasn't happened yet. No one's really challenged it yet. There's so much of this part of this legal field that's still evolving, that, for example, talking about music, Jay-Z just won a case against one of his former associates that took one of his albums as an NFT, put it out there. Jay-Z said, "Nah, bro, you can't do that." And Jay-Z sued, and then Jay-Z won, right? So there's so many parts of this legal field that are developing. Sampling is a deeper dive. We may get to that in about 10 years. Who knows? But to your point, right? You can still be predictive and say what rules and laws of sampling that is happening now, how would that apply in a digital realm? And chances are, it'll probably be pretty much the same. So you can be predictive because the laws really aren't changing that much when it comes to the actual music and actual protections as how people are using it. We good? Thanks, Ryan. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Kamal Hubbard. And I had a question. You brought up NFTs, and I've been working on an NFT project that uses AI-generated art. If I use AI-generated art with a previous design that's been copyrighted, what are some things I need to keep in mind? Or is that permissible?
Well, so the first question is, was the art that was copyrighted, how long ago was the copyright? Is the copyright still valid or is it expired?
I haven't even gotten that far.
Right. So
I've generated the images.
So it requires some research. I mean, so for example, I'm glad you asked this question. I was at a conference and someone said, well, listen, give me an example of something that is protected, that's no longer protected, that could be used. I said, the Mona Lisa. It's a couple hundred years old, right? It's not protected anymore. It's in the public domain, right? So you want to see if the art that you're using as the base for your AI-generated art is public domain or still protected. That's number one. Number two, and then deep dive in technology. That still has not really been thoroughly litigated or decided by regulators or legislatures. So that's something that's really had to be decided. AI is cutting edge. They're barely getting into crypto, the blockchain side. Forget AI. They're not even here yet, right? It's still catching up. Technology always moves faster than the law. Always moves faster than the law. Because why? Technology can happen in a day. And it would take the law 10 years to catch up to that change in that one day. But when the law catches up, it catches up. So I think that's all the time that I have. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right.